I'll go ahead and get us started. So we're joined this evening by Judith Rayskin, who probably for this crowd needs no introduction, but I will read my notes anyway. Judith is an associate professor of women's.
Full professor.
Copied and pasted from an old introduction.
Corrected on my way out.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Full professor. Women's gender and sexuality studies here at the U of O, and along with Linda Long, also joining us in the audience, was a project director for the Eugene Lesbian Oral History Project. Judith and Linda spearheaded this project to collect 83 oral histories from self-identified lesbians who came to and lived in Eugene in the 1950s, 70s, and 80s. And the project grew to include a digital exhibit, which you can still find online, a documentary, and the in-person exhibit that we hosted here at the MNCH for the past year. So this evening, we're also joined by three of the narrators from that project: Sarah Douglas, Linda Pinkney, and PJ Reese, going down the line. They're here this evening to share stories and reflections on their efforts to create community and fight discrimination on the U of O campus. Please join me in welcoming them.
Hi, it's bittersweet to be in this space with the wolves, you know, a beautiful exhibit. I think it's appropriate to follow the lesbians because they also run in packs, right? So it's a beautiful exhibit, and I'll always sort of, whatever's ever in here, I'm always going to see behind it some lesbian things. And I really want to thank all museum staff for over a year of really wonderful programming, and so many people came in, and this is the last of the panels. We will be having a reiteration of this exhibit at the Oregon Jewish Museum in June 2025. It will be different, but it will be a lot of the same stories and some different ones as well. Linda and my first public presentation based on this material was organized by Lauren in 2019 at the Viking Bracket. I don't know if any of you were there. There were so many people there that night that they had to turn people away. And that first event let us know that a wide range of the Eugene community wanted to know this history. That packed audience had people from all ages, people from all genders, people who lived in Eugene for a long time and a short time. The focus that night was also on LGBTQ history at the University of Oregon. So this is a really nice bookend for the many projects that the Museum of Natural and Cultural History has organized. I've had amazing experiences being in this space and eavesdropping on people, sharing their stories and telling me that they come from far away to celebrate their anniversaries or birthdays in this space, or to bring their parents or their children or their friends or their nibblings. There have been visiting groups of people, like I've heard, like walking groups have come in, and Facebook friend groups, and UO classes, and teenagers from the school groups who have come to share this experience together. So I want to start by saying several years ago, James Ivory, the director of the Merchant Ivory Films, was on campus to talk about the queer film for which he won the Oscar for the best screenplay. It was Call Me by Your Name, if you've seen that. So James Ivory, surprisingly, is a U of O alum. He's a gay man, and his films have included positive representations of gay men starting in the 1980s. He grew up in Klamath Falls as a UO alum and is now in his 90s. At the question and answer period for his talk, which filled the Redwood Auditorium, a student asked him what the campus gay community was like when he was a student here in the 1950s. Ivory answered, somewhat impatiently, I thought, that there wasn't a gay community on campus when he was a student in the 1950s. So how did a gay and lesbian community develop at the University of Oregon? What is needed structurally so that LGBTQ students, faculty, and staff can recognize each other and be safe enough to come out? What is the relationship between the campus and Eugene Springfield? Our panelists tonight, Sarah, Lynn, and PJ, and so many of you in the audience probably, are essentially responsible for creating an environment where queer people can now thrive and grow and contribute more widely to the world. You have all had important roles in making UO a better and more equitable place to work. So let's hear as much of this history as possible in the next hour or so. And I hope that people in the audience will contribute your memories and your thoughts to these questions that I have put together as well. I'll ask the panelists to address some questions, and then maybe even after each question, just ask if anybody has anything else to contribute. So first, can you all introduce yourselves and share what your position was at the University of Oregon?
Do you want me to do the 5-minute thing or just?
Yeah, do the 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
That'd be good.
Yeah, thank you. I want to get up so I can show you my shirt. I've been waiting a long time to wear this, and it's huge, but they only had one side. This is from the 1993 Gay and Lesbian March in Washington, DC. This was the third national march, and I was there, and so was Oregon. Yeah, a lot of people that I knew were there.
Can you use the microphone speaker?
Oh, sorry, I'm used to lecturing with that, but I haven't lectured in a long time. I'm a retired professor in the.
Yeah, you got to hold it up.
Oh, yes, okay, thank you.
Pretty close.
All right, how's this?
Good.
Is that better? Okay. I'm a retired professor in the Computer and Information Science Department here at the university. I came here in 1983 as an assistant professor when I was 40 years old. Now, those of you that can do a little math, you can figure how old I am now. And I was a lesbian then too, of course. In spring of 1989, I got tenure and the protection to be out. Okay. During the same spring, an openly gay student, Tim Hughes, running for executive office in the student elections, was harassed with death threats, nasty caricature posters, and his female running partner was assaulted. In late May, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance was still receiving numerous hate-filled calls every day. Now, 3 previously elected ASUO presidents had been lesbian and also subjected to both sexual harassment and sexual orientation harassment. Lynn, who's right here, was elected ASUO president in 1985, becoming the first openly gay person to be elected president of a collegiate student body in the United States. But the UO administration took little action on any of the kinds of harassment that these lesbian presidents had experienced in their election. However, in 1989, in the summer, after Tim Hughes, President Olam, who was the president of the university then, created an initiative, and I volunteered to be the co-chair of the Lesbian Gay Task Force. My co-chair, other co-chair was Cheney Ryan, who was a straight professor in the philosophy department. Now, it's kind of an interesting thing here. Actually, the original initiative was for one chair, and it was to be called the Gay Task Force. And of course, a number of us in the community here on campus kind of complained and said, well, what about the lesbians? And so here is one aspect of having a strong lesbian community here in Eugene had an effect. And also we wanted to retitle the task force and put lesbian first. So that became the title of this committee, which was a 2-year committee. There were 17 members from different parts of the UO, 5 faculty, 7 students, 5 staff. We were very balanced between gender and sexuality, but not by people of color, and that shouldn't be of any surprise to any of us here. In addition, we had about 20 other participants and consultants. Our charge was to investigate sexual orientation discrimination within the U of O and to make recommendations to create a more accepting environment. We met for 2 years from 1990 to 1992 and produced 2 documents of analysis and recommendations, many of which were accepted. So this was the first one that we produced, October 1990. And this is called Creating Safety, Valuing Diversity, Lesbians and Gay Men in the University. The second document was focused on gay and lesbian studies. And this was produced in June 1991, Teaching and Research and Scholarship on Lesbian and Gay Studies at the University. I doubt that many of you even know that this existed, but it was part of the scope of what we were looking at. During our 2 years, some of the recommendations that were made from this were immediately accepted, and others took several years to gain acceptance. But they were mostly concerning students and faculty and staff about work environment, different organizations. For example, the violence, reporting of violence on campus and harassment and such. But during the 2 years of the committee, and just immediately afterwards, 2 other very significant events happened. The first was October 1990, Greg Johnson, who was a gay instructor in the law school, came out to his class. He was later forced by the dean to apologize to the class for coming out. Yes, please.
There's a slide.
Not
I've
yet,
been
not
trying to
yet.
find the relevant
Yeah.
slides.
Yeah, yeah. We're- That's okay. Yeah, I don't have those eyes in the back of my head yet.
I'm like, I think maybe this should be the one.
Not quite, not quite, almost. I have to cue Lauren.
Okay.
And so he, yes,
Oh, I was just going to add, I was an adjunct at the law.
yes, I remember.
And he didn't just come out to his class.
He
There was
talked
a
about the
case
Bowers and
that
Hardwick,
happened down in-
Bowers and Hardwick,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Because that got still actually happened.
Yeah, well, there was
I
a-
have with letters and stuff related to that, and the dean and the dean's apology and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
that was-
Well, later, the Affirmative Action Office claimed that there had been no discrimination. Anyway, there was quite an uproar about this, and we can talk about it, and I got featured in the Register Guard. I was actually called the first gay professor. They'd always used the word homosexual before. And so I was on the front page of the Register Guard because I called for the removal of the dean of the law school. And it was very exciting times. But the second thing that happened was November 6, 1992, the Oregon Citizens Alliance, which was the OCA, many of you remember that, had an initiative on the ballot in November to outlaw homosexuality in the Oregon Constitution. Now, I think that these things are very hard to appreciate. Most of you here do, because you lived them, you were there. I was hoping there would be more young people here, but that's okay.
Week 10.
Yes, I know, week 10, finals, et cetera, et cetera. But what I wanted to do next was present more of the background history to understand the university and Oregon as a state in 1989 to 1990, when we were doing this task force. So some of these things you already know, and that's when the slides are going to come on too, but not quite yet. It's okay.
Yeah.
Not quite yet. Oh, you've got me
Yeah,
up there.
we're
Oh,
back.
gosh. Okay. So let me just walk you back into the 1950s and 1960s and 1970s. The world that I was born into and grew up in believed in having sex or even sexual feelings towards someone of the same sex was immoral, mentally ill, and illegal. Consequently, most of us lived hidden lives, either unexpressed or with secret activities and companions called the closet. And at that time, I mean, it's incredible when you realize this was imposed on 8 to 10% of the population. I mean, you know, however you count it, at least probably 5% or 6%. So the first thing one of the first kinds of protests began in the 1950s. Okay, Yes, yes, the Stonewall slide. So, but if we came out of the closet at that time, we were at risk of losing our family, our friends, and our jobs. We were liable to suffer imprisonment under anti-sodomy laws, treatment for mental illness, and even sterilization under eugenics laws. And if you don't know about what the state of Oregon had as its eugenics laws, I have a lot more detail on that. It's just incredible. If lesbians were married and had children, they would lose the rights to their children. For faculty at universities, this was the risk of losing our jobs if we did not have tenure, or losing our tenure due to moral turpitude. And we certainly could not teach that homosexuality was a positive aspect of being human. Beginning in the 1960s, young people, including myself as a college student, became very politicized. We participated in the civil rights protests in the South and against the Vietnam War that was drafting young men. Our protests were primarily passive resistance involving legal demands for civil rights, refusals to obey laws, and protest marches. During this time, women became highly politicized. NOW, which was the National Organization for Women, was formed in 1966. It's hard to imagine, but at that time, women who were married could not have their own credit cards or bank accounts. Divorce was exceedingly difficult. However, it is my belief that the women's movement spawned the first major protests organized by lesbians. Okay, next slide. Oh, we got it already, okay. Originally NOW claimed the Lavender Menace would taint the goals of feminism. After a huge uproar within the organization in 1971, NOW recognized lesbian feminists. You've got that nice slide. Yes, so there were wonderful marches. Many lesbian feminists became lesbian separatists and formed the famous Oregon land communities in the 1970s. Next slide there. Okay. Many of you came here to Eugene to become the Outliers and Outlaws, now documented in the U of O archive. Next slide. Then in the 1980s came the AIDS plague that politicized many gay and bisexual men as it ravaged 330,000 of them. Across the US, people became intensely hostile to gay men and women. Conservative forces condemned people living with the HIV/AIDS as immoral. The statistics were shocking, and to go over them again, I didn't know the totals here, but now we have totals. In 1990, AIDS caused 61% of all deaths of men aged 25 to 44 in San Francisco, 35% in New York, and 25% in Portland, Oregon. That's very shocking. In response, the gay community organized marches and coming out of the closet with the slogan, "Silence equals death." So this is ACT UP, which is, whoops, not quite yet. That was ACT UP, which is one of the groups that was very involved. Also, October 11th, 1987 was the second national march in Washington for lesbian and gay rights. So let's go back to the University of Oregon. So next slide. Okay, good. And we're almost done here. So what did the University of Oregon look like in 1990? This was a survey done by the task force, and it shows a survey of both faculty and staff and students. And you have the first one is the campus environment, just in general, how that was. And at that time, 57% of the lesbian and gay students considered it unaccepting. However, the heterosexual, just look at the faculty there, was 24% was accepting and 54% were not accepting. So over half of the gay and lesbian faculty felt that it was unaccepting. Harassment and violence against lesbians and gays This is an important statistic that I'll show, another slide in just a minute. 24% of the lesbian and gays on campus had been physically assaulted, 18% sexually assaulted, and 54% verbally threatened. And you can compare that in the right column to faculty and staff experience. Now, this was just, gay and lesbian persons. The third table was how out people were. And in general, only 17% of the students were out and 10% of the faculty and staff. And I think PJ might talk about that. And so those statistics are pretty amazing. But when you realize the background, particularly the AIDS crisis, which really politicized gay men, you can see the result. Next slide. Okay, this, after the task force filed its reports and we made a lot of changes on the campus, this was a study that was done by Stephanie Carnahan in the Dean of Students office, where the committee had recommended that we have a special person, a special subdivision of the office that would be attentive both to the culture and education of both lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students. We kept adding names on us as the report got more experienced with things and the university. And so here you can see there has been improvement. And I want to just say that is one of the best statistics that I have that can show that, yes, there was a change here on the campus as a result of the things that we did through the task force and through people, all of us together, working to change things. So that's it.
Thank you. I'll come back to them.
Okay, now there's gonna be a pop quiz. Anybody who doesn't have a number 2 pencil has already earned a 0. Fascinating, thank you. So, my name is Lynn Pinkney, and I was born right here on Kalapuya land at Sacred Heart Hospital. And my parents brought me home to a little house, 1-bedroom house that was about 100 yards that way. So I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Bend, but I came here at age 19 for college after putting in a year at COCC. And the year was academic year 1974-75.
Then can you put the microphone a little closer to your?
Oh,
that people
sorry.
can hear you.
So 74-75, it was a good year. I think that I was really running through my mind as Sarah was talking. In 1974 was the year that Congress passed legislation to require that banks allow women to have their own bank account. Okay, I mean, think about it. And how do you be a lesbian if you don't have a man in the house and you can't even get a bank account? A lot of banks did let you anyway, but anyway. So 74, there were signs of hope. Holly Near was singing Waterfall. Filling up and spilling over. Elton John, I think that was the year Yellow Brick Road came out, and there was an overtly lesbian song on there. Anyway, I came here to the U of O, and already in existence, there was the Gay People's Alliance. And honestly, we did call ourselves gay women. We did, I did. Lesbian was this weird sexual word. We didn't use it. I mean, Harriet, am I wrong?
No, I used it, but you know.
Yeah.
But it was
Radical.
kind of a universal.
Yeah, but so I called myself a gay woman
Yeah.
anyway. Gay People's Alliance, and they had been established in 1969, but the year they first got funding was 74, 75. So I get here and there's this gay organization that exists. And it has an office, lo and behold. And they do really fun things, like they would hold dances and they would have things like, a hugging booth or a kissing booth, or they tried to do things that would improve the lives of gay and lesbian people. They would help us find each other by having these events. And there was a telephone number. If you were between Portland and San Francisco, any place, you had to be in Eugene, and you look at the yellow pages and you looked up the word gay. What you got was the Gay People's Alliance at the University of Oregon, and it was the only thing between Portland and San Francisco, okay? So they were making referrals. It was just really important that they be there, and I just can't tell you what that meant to me as a 19-year-old coming from Bend, which really was a timber town once upon a time. Anyway, so we participated. I think they kind of tried to keep it light. I found my here to stay button. We're gay and we're here to stay. And I had a button that said, it's okay to be gay. Just saying this stuff out loud was just mind blowing. So that was a wonderful time, but I also became really radical, decided I was communist and was gonna help organize healthcare workers. So I dropped out of school. And I lived here in Eugene and worked as a nurse's aide, and we were unsuccessful with our efforts. The same group was successful in Salem. They actually organized the nurses' aides, but we did not make it. Sacred Heart was not going to let that happen. Anyway, there was a lot of back and forth between the campus and the community at that time. I think there was less of a town and gown thing. The bars were very unifying, and the university had events and speakers and activities that attracted people onto campus. So I don't ever really remember a time when I wasn't coming to campus for activities. So 1977, I'm not enrolled that year, but the Eugene City Council passed a measure that said gay and lesbian people have basic civil rights to housing and employment. And immediately a recall effort arose, and that was measure 51. And suddenly a community that had thought it was kind of cool that the city council did this, suddenly we were faced with a campaign that was going to get rid of this and demonstrate how horrid we were. So we fought back, and No on 51 was one of my first gay and lesbian political campaigns. I tabled and marched down the street, and Harriet's nodding, she was there. And we lost that campaign. The good citizens of Eugene, about 2-1, decided we didn't get the same rights as everybody else. So this is another button from that. I mean, we tried to be really positive. What do gay people want? Ask me. Anyway, in 1980, I got my ass back to college. So I'm back on campus. We sold our old Volvo to pay the tuition because I earned too much as a nurse's aide to get any financial aid. Anyway, so I was finished my degree in sociology in a couple of years, and I was one of the co-directors of what by then was called GALA, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance. And we did a lot of fun things too. We wanted gay and lesbian people to be able to find each other safely And so we all wore our buttons and came out as best we could. We had dances. We had to fight with the university administration because we wanted our dances off campus. So, because we were gonna get harassed and we did get harassed when we did have them on campus. We used to have them at the Collier House, which I guess is about to be moved.
That's.
It is, but I'm saying we got harassed when we did that. There would be frat boys waiting outside for us. But I tried to make these fun. I actually drew most of these posters. This it says millions go gay. Gala's Halloween dance. And that one was at Laurelwood Golf Course. We rented there a lot. Jamo, Eugene's hottest new all-women's band. This was out at that women's garden club out on River Road. So we asked for and had to fight for, but got money to hold these activities off campus so that people could be private if they wanted to. And we also wanted to attract people who were not students. I mean, anyway, I decided to run for student body president. I was approached by a very, very progressive frat boy named John Dreesen. And I was in law school by then. And so John and I ran and won handily. I was shocked, but I was out completely. My main student government experience was running gala, holding gay dances. And we did stuff like, there was a display case in the EMU. You had to go right past it to get to the cafeteria or the elevators. And we always reserved it for the week of Valentine's Day. And then we would fill it with all kinds of gay stuff every year, everybody was all upset. But it wasn't just fun. By then, 1970s, after 1977, the culture wars really started to heat up. Anita Bryant turned things really nasty. And so we had supposedly preachers on campus all the time screaming at us every single day that we were sinners, we were going to hell, that we would never work, we would never get to do anything, and we were just we were of the devil. And we heard that every day on the way to class. The gala office was interesting because it was that phone number that you could get to. We listened to the tapes every morning when we come in and listen to the messages from the night before and just hear the most horrible, disgusting things of people screaming and grunting and, and there was harassment. There were signs, and many of the messages were personal for me, especially after I was student body president and had been in the newspaper. Those self-avowed homosexuals,
right.
self-avowed homosexuals. They were trying, not to get sued, I guess. Anyway, that was a really odd time, and our hearts were on our sleeves. Then something really bad started to happen. That's my silence equals death pin. HIV hit. And things got really serious, even more serious than they had been before. And so we fought back. We tried to get the university to change. When I left, after being student body president, after raising a whole variety of issues with the university, everything from violence and harassment all the way to the fact that the university didn't have housing that a gay or lesbian adult could occupy. Not to mention no protection from a professor who thought we were insane or whatever. I got nowhere. I remember one meeting about housing telling Paul, there is no place for my family to live at this university. And some bright young thing over in the dean's office says, you know, Lynn, it isn't really discrimination. It just feels like discrimination. It just feels like it.
What real discrimination would look like.
And what would that feel like?
And what would that feel like?
Yeah. So, you know, I left feeling like we had gotten nowhere, that I had not made any impact on the university. I could see the changes that were happening socially, much broader. Things started to happen really quickly after I left. That next decade was amazing. From, well, really less than a decade, from 85 to 92 was just a stunning time. And I'm sure there are other people who can tell. I wasn't at the university anymore. I directed the statewide College and University Student Association. I was their lobbyist. Went on to practice law for a while. Had kids, stayed home. I have a dog now. I cook dinner for my partner. I really enjoy my garden.
I think I only sent you two pictures, so. Oh, okay. Hi, I'm PJ. I got my bachelor's degree here and was a student athlete. The last female 3-sport athlete at the university, played volleyball, basketball, and softball. Thank you. Went out, taught high school for 7 years, was a PE teacher and a coach, stereotype number one. I came back to get my master's degree, was a graduate teaching fellow with the physical education department and then with the athletic department with the volleyball team. I landed a job coaching volleyball, which I did here for a decade. And then I was a faculty member, an administrator. I ran the PE department for 23 years. I'm now the public address announcer for volleyball and softball. And so I've been here a year before you did the first time. I got here in the fall of '73. I've been on campus for 40 years. Hard to believe with this baby face, right? Or that baby face. That would have been about 1975-ish. We're practicing on the lawn behind the library because we didn't have facilities for very many facilities at all for female athletes. We practiced on the grass behind the library and we played at Amazon Park. When we competed. While I was here, both as an athlete and a coach and being in the athletic culture and world, these two were scaring the hell out of me and I was completely closeted. It wasn't because of these two that I was closeted. I was closeted because of the knowing, not the fear of, the knowing that I would lose my spot on a dating team, lose my job. That was a given. And so I lived in fear for the first half of my career. That's later when I was coaching in the 80s, from 1984 to 93. I coached volleyball. I'm that one over there. So lived with the assurance that I would lose my job, and it was frightening because being athletic was all I knew. I felt it was my gift. It's the only place I found community, and I don't mean necessarily community in the sense of being around other lesbians, although I certainly was. But even in my college years, we were not out to each other. So while all this is going on, that Sarah and Lynn are talking about, even on teams together, we were closeted. We had occasionally an idea about who might be like us, but never even had the courage to speak to each other about it, given the culture of athletics, which is still not anything to shout from the rooftops about, although it's incredibly better, and I'll probably get a chance to talk about that later. So I know you have some questions, Julie, so let's just throw it back to you and get this party started.
Would you, do you wanted to say something about the issue of being closeted because you were recruiting athletes?
Yeah, sure, I can jump to that. So, in about 1992, the athletic director was Bill Byrne, and he and Rich Brooks, the football coach, went to the Hilton to publicly declare their support of the LGBTQ athletes and employees in the athletic department. They had to go off campus to do that because you can't be political on campus when you're employed. You can't, use work time to be political. So they went to the Hilton, they called the 3 local TV stations and said, come down there. And I went to hear what he was going to say, and I'm a closeted coach at this time. And he said, we support you, you're safe here. And it was, one of the measures was going on, sure, and he was coming out against the anti-gay lesbian measure and standing up with the athletic department. I stood there in tears, having no idea that my boss's boss was an ally. And all to say that I still couldn't be out, even though he wouldn't fire me. I could not be the reason that a student athlete wouldn't come to the University of Oregon and represent our program and our school. And it wasn't the kids that cared, it was their parents. And so even though Bill said, I have your back, I knew my coach didn't, and I was on 32 consecutive one-year contracts here at the university. And so at any point you go, and so I was closeted and would have continued to be closeted, but for reasons we might get into if we have time, I ended up quitting coaching about a year later. Yeah. I'll pass that back then.
So you'll have covered a lot of my questions, but I can still ask you more. When you were being activists on campus, or looking for support, how did you make coalitions that would be supportive to you? How did you find other people like Cheney, for instance, who actually, Cheney Ryan wrote me an email and said, I hear you're doing this big project, and I was there and I have a lot to say. And then I started sending emails and they all bounced back to me, so I guess he moved. But it was just recently on an account. But anyway, how did you find allies to work with? Because it was hard to do it just on your own, some of the work that you got done. I would like to start with that.
I'll speak to that. Well, as I just mentioned, I was closeted. I was one of the 1% up on Sarah's slide. But for personal health and well-being, I started to seek out feminists. And so I figured, and this is when I was coaching, I would go to the women's studies department and look for all the things that they were doing. And I got involved with, was able to do some projects with Sandra Morgan, and Joan Acker was an advisor on my master's project. And don't ask me how I got her, but I got Joan Acker. And Catherine Osigui, I took a class from her. And so I was looking for the feminists, and I was just finding strong women on campus who I could sit at their feet.
We can, all allies were somewhat uneasy with us, I have to say. Whether we were challenging people who wanted to help us, but who were in the closet, or whether they wanted to distance themselves from us. So we found some allies in women faculty, the women's studies department, the women in the sociology department. And frequently spoke in women's studies classes. And I can't tell you how many women's studies 101 classes I have told my coming out story to. But they were very much allies. They wanted us to succeed.
And when you say us, how many people are you talking about then?
Well, you know, of people who were active in the gala, 25, 30
Okay.
max. People who would show up at a dance of ours, 100, 125, I mean, they were popular. We would get a DJ from one of the downtown bars and, you know, it was nice. We had to end them early, but that meant there was time to go to the bar if you were old enough. So it worked. But we also had many, many allies who very much wanted us to succeed, but could not be out and could not even talk to us about that. We had people in the Dean of Students office, people in the administration of the EMU who were incredibly supportive. I'll never forget one rally, just a gay rights rally. And different people were speaking, and it was a pretty good sized crowd. And one of the young men, gay men, up at the back of the crowd was actually, people started to shove and hit him. And Adele McMillan, who ran that EMU forever, came flying out of there. I will tell you, like a bat out of HE double toothpicks. And she put an end to that. And she was a person who we didn't really understand until after that was an ally. So it was hard. People weren't openly allies
Interesting.
during my time.
Well, when I first came to the campus in 1983, I lived a divided life. I mean, you know, the lesbian community here was just incredible. In fact, it was one of the attractive reasons to take the job here. But on the campus, I was closeted. And in my department, I was closeted, despite the fact that we actually had a rule here. The faculty voted in 1971. Don Betry got the faculty senate to, or at that time there wasn't a senate, it was just a huge assembly, to prohibit any kind of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. The state OARs in, I'm not sure exactly what the date was, but it was definitely 1988. The OARs are the Oregon Administrative Rules, and at that time the campus was under a state education, higher education group, and a lot of control was leveraged over us by the legislature. And in 1988, the OARs prohibited sexual orientation discrimination in educational facilities. So that was pretty progressive considering the situation. But when I came, even though those protections were theoretically there, I didn't feel like I could come out until I had tenure. And even then, you know, it was called moral turpitude. That was how they got us. Either that or the anti-sodomy laws, which are incredible, and some of them still exist today. So, I basically lived in a two-state system. One was on campus, and there were some lesbian faculty that I knew. I didn't really know any gay men faculty, but there was a very strong lesbian faculty group, small, and coming through CSWS and, well, at that time, women's studies wasn't really even a department quite yet. And, you know, we had parties together and we, you know, had fun together and things like that. But I didn't have any connection with the gay men on the campus. But the task force itself, by sending out these surveys, all of a sudden, well, not only did I get death threat calls, but I also got calls from some of the gay men on campus, including one over in education and later was in anthropology, Harry Wolcott. I don't know how many of you know about Harry, but he was very out at that point because certain situation that had happened. And he was complaining about the survey, that it was quantitative and we should be doing a more qualitative interviewing. And I thought, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. And so he began to help me make connections with the gay men on faculty and staff on campus. Very small. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of people because I'm sure there were a lot of people in the closet still. So that was, you know, important allies. And then the task force, because of the way we tried to balance participation from different groups of people and such, it was an amazing number of very straight people who were right there in Shirley Wilson. Do you remember her? Yeah. Well, there were a lot of,
One of those allies.
yeah, one of our allies, and I didn't even realize it at the beginning. But this was very good. Where we didn't have allies, and I think this was one of your questions that I wanted to just mention, was that we did not get support from the people on campus who I would say were involved heavily in what they used to call ethnic studies. I could not believe this place that they called it that, but that was where the African American studies were, or any of the Chicano or you know, Latinx, we would say these days. And they did not want to touch us because we were, you know, well, first of all, there was a competition for resources, which is ridiculous. It never really is a competition for resources, but allying themselves with people who were so immoral was negative. It was like the now issue of the Lavender Menace ruining the ability of women to get rights and such. So we did not have very strong support at all from any of the people of color here on the campus. You know, there weren't a lot, of course. Some there were some, but yeah, but it was a shock to me because I thought, well, you know, you've got gay people in here. Yeah.
It's sort of an interesting segue, but also, I want to ask you about your relationship with students. So I remember that the task force decided to figure out a way to tell students what faculty and staff were safe on campus for them to talk to. And so there were those little stickers that you could put on your door. Remember the stickers that you all made and put out for us, to put on the door, on your door, so the student coming by, whether they're your student or anybody's student, would know that they could talk to a faculty person or a staff person and they would be safe. There's an interesting difference between faculty of color being able to support their students and queer people being able to support their students. And I see this to this day. I mean, this is something we're working on a lot, that a lot of the faculty who are in the Black faculty strategic group or the Latino strategic group have a real clear sense of how to help their students, how to help young students coming up. the gay and lesbian queer professors do not have that strategic group right now. They don't have what you had.
Yeah.
And there's a really interesting reason for that, which is that kids have been kept away, gay kids have been kept away from gay adults, always. So that, and also the danger, the so-called danger of teachers and professors, now they say grooming, but somehow influencing students, has contributed to some policies, around the relationship between gay professors, gay and lesbian queer professors and students. Things have changed a lot, which I'll talk about at the end, but we're still having this problem. And so I'm wondering what your connection and relationship with students was when you were on campus, as a faculty person or as law student and ACO president.
Well, I can answer that briefly. One of the good things that we always did was, in October 15th, which is coming out day.
October 11th.
Oh, the 11th, okay, October 11th, 15th, anyway. So, the Emerald would publish a list of faculty who would identify faculty, staff, even, graduate students and such. Not generally students, but people who were kind of more in the principal organizations. And you would list yourself as lesbian or gay or whatever, or an ally. So there was a section for allies, and that could be anything. It could be somebody that didn't want to come out or whatever. And that was done for years and years and years. I think they stopped doing it. But it was a really important way that you could connect up with students. So there were students in my department who then came to me. They sort of already knew because the word was out, yeah, so to speak, bad pun. But it was, there was all this rumors even among the male. My department was almost entirely male, straight. And so, anytime I would do something that was sort of inappropriate to them, or they didn't like it, they would, of course, characterize me as that dyke, or whatever. And so that was, there was always that tension going on there. And we had very few students who actually identified themselves within that. We also have a lot of international students. And they, of course, would be very closeted. But I had a lot of student support from the students who identify themselves to me as being gay or lesbian or bisexual or whatever.
I'm a little at a loss. When I was a student here, no one was even thinking about. When I was a law student, I guess Don Vetri was a professor who was quite out, and there were a couple of adjunct people who was more quietly known, were members of the church. But really, there was nothing.
We look to each other. I came out in 82, I was looking at you.
Yeah, I know.
I looked at you.
Yeah,
And we looked at each other. I didn't look
Yeah.
at my teacher.
we got on our bikes and went and got our hair cut off.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you taught me, you go around and put up posters for the dances.
Yeah.
So that we could come together. Look at
Right.
each other.
Well, we also had some community support. Okay, we went down to the bar,
Yes.
and there were people down there like Butch.
Yeah.
You get a drink or a tattoo.
That's right.
And the court of the Emerald Empire, the queens were here, and they supported us sometimes. They would give money for an activity we wanted to do or something. It was very cool.
Can I just say something about that also?
So you remember we used to have the Queer Film Festival. right?
Yeah.
And we had it filled up, 180 PLC, and then it filled up the Bijou, and it filled up the Metro.
Mhm.
So we don't have it anymore. And part of the reason is, I think the university has a really strong feeling of incubating the students on campus, keeping them safe from the outside world. For gay students, that's really harmful.
Mhm.
And so I fought for years to keep the queer film festival in the community, and they really didn't want it in the community. And so it died, because it used to be a place where adults and students, young adults, could see each other. My students, and I've been saying this for a year, do not know any gay people over the age of 25 to this day. And there's a reason about this. I mean, the reason is that gay people, queer people adults are kept away from younger people. It's institutionalized in our society. So we don't have the queer film festival anymore, because students, they're gonna say, go on and watch something on Netflix, you know, they don't have any of the community experience. So you had a connection, a town gown connection,
Right.
that was allowed students to meet adults. And they don't have that now.
Yeah. And our dances were like that too. It cost $1 to get in and everybody came. I mean, a lot of people came from the community and we had to fight to use those funds off campus. It's a real problem. It's one of those things where you start to gain acceptance and you get what we used to call it is co-opted. And you win something with acceptance and you lose something because we relied on each other and we made it a way that worked for us. And I don't see that now so much.
I want to hear about the athlete students.
Yeah.
So this is the reason I was positive, is because of the relationship of an employee or the adult in a situation and the student. And that since, even though the world that's not connected to us on a daily basis thinks that it's about sex, there is the sexuality component of it, obviously, and so that's, the fear is of inappropriate relationships between the adult in the room and the student athlete. And in order for me to keep my job, even to be known as being a part of the LGBTQ community was a threat. But it was also the reason that I insisted on staying closeted so I could stay there for the kids. Because, and I advised and supported and helped women athletes, not even just on my team. And I know that if I wasn't there, they had nobody. They didn't have anybody in the counseling center. They didn't have anybody on campus. They didn't have anybody in the coaching ranks. I believed that the decade that I was there, it was me. And so I flew under the radar and I just kept my ear to the ground. And I've helped kids on different teams, so my own occasionally. Although ironically, I was a volleyball coach here, and volleyball is one of the sports where there do seem to be the fewest number of lesbians. Maybe gymnastics is another one that I think, hate to throw the stereotypes around, but also played basketball and softball when I was in school, and of course, that's where we flourish. And we continue to flourish.
I have that ponytails.
So, but yeah, the whatever the fear is out there of the inappropriate relationship is the reason that, besides not wanting to lose my job, somebody had to be there for them. And I would just want, while I've got the mic, I will just say, I spent another decade on campus as an employee when I left coaching on the Bridges panels, which is a group of students and faculty who would go from classroom to classroom wherever we were invited or welcome and talk about our lives. There'd be 3 or 4 of us and the instructor would give the class over to us and we educated the student body, one class at a time on what our lives were in the LGBTQ community. I did that for 10 years because I could never do it when I was with the athletic department. When I wasn't with the athletic department, I did it as much as I could. It was healing.
I want to open things up to anybody.
I want to open things up to people who are here, who have particular memories about things that was like on campus, how things changed. If you're still on campus, what you think about things that are going on now.
Thank you, everybody. This has been so interesting, and, I did want to just speak to what you said, Sarah, about, people of color on campus, and, you know, what you said was a lack of support, and I know that when the Measure 9 campaign happened, I have a very clear memory of Professor Edwin Coleman, who was an African Americanist, in the English department, which was my department, and, he was a very religious man, very conservative, religiously Christian. He did not approve of homosexuality, but when Measure 9 happened, he really came forward and he said, I will really support, and we should all support the rights of gay, lesbian, and bisexual queer people. And so I just wanted to, you know, I just want us to remember that, and he's passed on, and I think it was really in some ways a difficult decision for him given his religious beliefs, but I remember him getting up on a stage and taking the mic and telling a room full of people that he was going to fight against Measure 9. So that's all I wanted to say.
So let me make a comment on that. He changed his mind over a great period of time. I think he changed. Someone that did not support us, and you know, when a lot of the stuff happened with the OCA and Measure 9, and the statewide initiative failed. And then what OCA did was they tried to go into smaller communities and then force the smaller communities to put in their charters or constitutions or whatever counties or cities have. And I was living in Veneta at that time, and that was a focus of their campaigning. And this whole issue of education, and you're mentioning it too, PJ, about the influence of the coach on the player and the older person on the younger person. And one of the things about education is that it is contact between older adults and younger people. And so there's always that particular potential, if you will, for grooming or whatever. But, Coleman was, it wasn't just simply gays and lesbians or homosexuals. It was also the very more conservative religious parts of the African American community were against feminism too. That often happens in the situation. People feel like they're competing for the visibility or the money or whatever. But I'm really, I'm really glad that he changed and supported the Measure 9. But DeFazio, I couldn't get DeFazio, I couldn't get any of the university presidents, I couldn't get anybody that had any real political visibility to speak out against Measure 9.
Although there was a wonderful ad of President Frohnmeyer and his father. Do you remember that? The Republicans who went on television. His father had been governor and Frohnmeyer was our president, and they did an ad together against Measure 9.
Well, he had a gay sister. Yeah.
I'd like to just speak to one that in the 70s, we were getting ready for the 77, 78 campaign. Things were really nasty and ugly, whatever. But I knew a number of women who were lesbian but also people of color. Particularly I had more connections with someone who were Black American. And I talked to them about joining and having them be spokespersons. But when you are in a minority group, when you're already you know, hundreds and hundreds of years of what they went through. You know, the church was a very central part for a number of people who were in Black and community, because they were still dealing with racism. They're still dealing with racism, but it was, you know, so for how it was explained to me was, and this is just a personal story, it's not representative of, you know, of everybody, but was that they had too much to lose. That was, you know, they couldn't like pass. Most of them couldn't pass, right? So what did they have to deal with that imbalance and very whiteboarding was their church. And to come out for them, even though many of us lost our churches and our family as well, the politics and the strength of getting through every day was there. And it was just too much. It was too much to lose. And it was very hard. And, you know, when you, whether you're out or whether you're in the closet, there are pluses and minuses, there are gains and there's losses. And I totally get, I knew a number of people like in Oregon Hall, women who were gay, but they weren't ever gonna talk to me. I was way too out.
Yeah.
You know, and I understood that. I didn't take that in a bad way. But I think it's good to remember that some of these other communities, particularly people of color, are been going through without support from the rest of us necessarily, going through their own trouble and traumas. And so it was tough. It was a tough thing.
I just want to say thank you, Harriet, and also to say that both positions were very hard. To be the advocate, to be on the front lines, to do the work that the people were doing to say us too.
Right.
And the people who had to stay closeted and for whatever the reasons were, and were not living an authentic life. We paid a price. Both positions were hard and I think necessary.
I just wanted to say that there's a wonderful movie called Ballot Measure 9. You can see on Canopy, and I think you can see it anywhere, but it was made in 1995, so it has footage all of that time. And it shows really incredible coalitions between people of color and gay people, and the crossover of gay people of color. And but the film deals with that issue, and it's really good. Linda.
Just wanted to give a shout out to Professor Mary Wood for helping, so many people helped put this report together with Sarah and Jeannie Ryan. And I know you worked really hard on this, and so did my spouse, Anne Leskaya, wrote part of this and edited it, and
Amanda and Diane Duga.
Amanda and Diane, yeah, and you know, it's interesting, the publication doesn't really attribute, I mean, there's a list of the members, yeah.
You'll notice there, yeah, I mean, that's intentional.
I know, but.
Yeah.
It's
a
not
group
even,
product.
it wasn't even in the library, it wasn't even cataloged in the library, so now if you look up Mary Wood, if you look up, Sarah Douglas, Jeannie Ryan, Anne Leskaya, up pops the evidence of this. And so it is that. Yeah, and the other thing I just want to say is, so many people, so many faculty worked towards, I don't know, more awareness of, LGBTQ life, and so many people in the English department, worked really hard, like Marilyn Farwell worked really hard to create CSWS with Joan Acker and so many other people, the establishment of women's studies first as just a program, I guess. Hank Alley, yeah, and my spouse, Anne Leskaya, I think was the first person who offered a course in humanities with the word lesbian in the title, and it was lesbian literature, and so many people ran to sign up for that course. It was revolutionary.
What year?
So it was in the early 2000s, wasn't it, Mary?
So that late.
That late. She had courses, but never with the word lesbian. You had to have courage to use
So
that
what
word.
about Barb Ryan's courses in the mid-70s? Did they not have the word lesbian in them? I think they
We can
did.
check the catalog.
You should.
We can check the UL
So-
catalogs. Okay, the last thing I wanted to say is, I've said this before, about Lynn's work, but, people don't know that before Lynn was ASUO president, the only way you could get into Night Library if you were in a wheelchair was to get permission to go in the back door. And so through Lynn's effort, that ramp, you know, that you can, on the east side, that you can walk, that you can use, it was through Lynn's efforts that that ramp was established, and the library balked at it because of the architecture, right? It was
Well,
a historic building.
It was a historic
Here,
building.
you should tell all about it.
That was discrimination historic, but hey.
Yeah. So one day, Paul Olam called me up and said, guess what? The state system is coming for your excess fees. You have a bunch of money. And I said, okay, thanks. And we wanted to spend a bunch of it. We expanded the childcare center big time. But the other thing we did was we said, well, we've got to get people into the library. And at that time, you know, there's the two big doors that are really heavy. But there was a reading room where you went in to read the newspaper. So there was a little side entrance that you could go in through a normal door. And so it was actually my idea for how to do it and preserve the historic structure. And they said, oh, no, you know, we're gonna have to pay all these architects and everything. And I said, no, we have an architecture school here. There are architecture students and faculty who will do this, and they did.
We're running out of time. I just want to also say that another really important person who was in women's and gender studies was Nadia Telsey. And Nadia did amazing work on this campus, teaching her class self-defense from the inside out. And through women's and gender studies and physical education and her nonprofit Breaking Free, she taught thousands of students and community members for well over 40 years, improving their lives and making them freer. And I'm sorry to share that Nadia passed away last week. Diane is her spouse. And until the very end of Nadia's life, she was getting the word out about her new book that allows people to work through her program on their own and in groups. I immediately bought one, sent it to my daughter at college and said, get your friends together, I'll buy you more. The book is called Get Empowered, a practical guide to thrive, heal, and embrace your confidence in a sexist world. And I had Nadia come into my Women's Studies 101 class many times to just do a role play. And every time it floored me. It's just like basic ways of knowing your environment and knowing, you know, women are so constricted in time and space. And many, the one that really sticks in my head is that she had one, you're at a bus stop and some guy says, oh, I really like your earrings. Can I see them? And she was like, no, you know, like, how do you maintain, you know, just know your boundaries. It's not appropriate, you know, and to be able to look around you and see how to keep yourself safe and free, not scared, you know, and free. So it's called self-defense from the inside out. It was a psychological approach, although she was a black belt and everything. And taught her physical skills. But I just wanted to acknowledge her here because she worked on this campus for a really long time and helped so many students, and the ripple effect from that, from each of the students, and now they're, you know, teaching their daughters and their nieces, you know. But she also expanded her vision for the book. It's people of color, it's people who are minority sex, you know, sexual minority people, queer people, all kinds of people, and women who are endangered in this way. So, my heart goes out to you, Diane. And then the other thing I want to say is just a little update. We had a student on this panel who couldn't come tonight, but I wanted her to talk about her experience, but I just want to say that, there are some things that are really different from when you all were here. And one is that there is a gay dorm. What you accomplished was amazing, which was having married family housing for grad students. So that if you were queer, you couldn't live there, you could live anywhere else, so you changed that, thank God. And, but we have a gay dorm, we also have, wing, the dorm is people who identify LGBTQ, and then people who identify as gender expansive. So non-binary students, trans students, because think of the discomfort and danger of rooming with somebody who doesn't understand, particularly when it's about your body and changing your clothes and so forth. We also have, since 2009, an academic residential community, LGBTQ plus scholars, academic residential community. So these students live together, they take a big lecture class together, and then they meet with a faculty person once a week to talk about that big class, but also about being queer on campus and in the world. And I've taught that class a lot. And so that's something that's on campus.
Can I also add that the athletic department has an ongoing initiative called Be Oregon, and it's about creating safe space for student athletes to live authentically, whether that's has to do with race, ethnicity, but certainly sexuality. And it was devised by 3 gay guys at Nike. And there's a beautiful emblem in the shirt. I meant to bring it with me, but it's called Be Oregon. And at every athletic event on the big screens, they'll have student athletes talk about what it means to them to live an authentic life and how the athletic department has is paving the way for them. And so progress, baby.
That's great. So, Judith, one thing,
Uncle Phil.
We have come a long way.
in 1985, I was the first student body president who did not get to throw out the first football because I was a lesbian.
On the other, we now have a queer studies minor, since 2009. So that's, you can major in minor in women's gender studies, women's gender sexuality studies, or get a graduate certificate, or minor in queer studies. So these are things that keep happening. And I would say that what you had in terms of the committee of strong connections with over the years building. When I came, I felt like there were a lot of queer faculty, like I knew them all, and there was a lot. And the younger queer faculty now, partially because of COVID, but also because of the way academia is now, they don't know each other. So I just had a meeting 2 weeks ago in the dean's office about starting a strategic group for queer faculty, because even that group of 8 people for lunch, nobody knew each other. And I thought, like, what? So, so that's, we've gone backwards on that kind of cohesive glue, and I think we're gonna build it back up again. But thank you all for your incredible work over the years to make this place really good for all of us who are still here, and for those who are coming next, and for actually Eugene and the state as a whole. Thanks so much.